Hello everyone, this is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This episode is My Angel Guide. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support the work of Astral Club, you can certainly do so. There is somewhere around 100 downloaded episodes now available to patrons on Patreon that you can put on your podcast app and listen to anywhere. You get no commercials, and there's an email where we can talk back and forth on Patreon. And there's advanced videos that you get on Sunday rather than having to wait for them. And if you're interested in supporting us on Patreon, you'll find a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like to learn to astral project, be glad to send you some information. If you're interested, look for the email in the description. Now, my angel guide, I have mentioned him a number of times throughout my episodes. But I'd like to devote an entire episode to just talking about him and my relationship with him, because I've noticed that there's some misunderstanding about the nature of his abilities and our relationship. And some of it is my fault because I didn't explain it to the fullest extent. And I think there's also the fault of our media and society, which has spread a lot of information out there on the subject of angels, guides, whatever word you want to use. And a lot of it is inaccurate. And so I want to share with you my experience with my angel guide. Keep in mind, your mileage may vary, but this is my experience with my angel guide. Now, it was prompted in a way by a lot of different people, but most recently, Treehouse, who is a longtime supporter of Astral Club, and I'm very grateful to him, he posed a question about the Loosh Collector series of episodes. And he mentioned that these beings were able to transport me bodily, my physical body, to these two different places in space-time, most likely in the future. And he suggested that possibly, if I spoke with my angel guide, that he might be able to instruct me as to how I can do that for myself. In other words, locate or translocate my physical body rather than just my astral body. And I'll answer, and I answered his question, and I'll discuss the answer at the end of the episode. But what I want to do is I want to share more about what's involved here, just so, because invariably, whenever I have a video where I encounter a problem or a lack of knowledge or a lack of ability, invariably there's someone who will quite, understandably say, hey, why don't you just get the information, have it spoon-fed to you from your angel guide? And I think that's why I need to do this episode. So, first up, I just want to mention, of course, that I've never mentioned his name to anybody who's a long-term listener to this channel. You know the reason I don't mention his name is because he's asked me not to, and because mentioning the name of a being like that, it can be used by others to try to attract attention. And that attention could be anything from strident, if the person involved is powerful, to a whisper in the background, which can just be annoying. So I've never shared the name, and I never will, as I gave him my word. Next up, I think it's important to talk that he's not a genie. I don't get wishes from him. So I can't just go to him and say, oh, I wish for this power or I wish for that power. That's not his job. I think it's important that everybody realizes that. He's not my, Aladdin genie. Okay? That's not his job. And it's not properly his job either. What is his job? Well, he teaches, he instructs, and he tends to use the Socratic approach to teaching. And you may have had professors like that in college, and if you were lucky enough, in high school. But these are instructors who, when you pose a question, rather than just supplying you with the answer, they'll ask questions back, causing you to think through the process and come up with the answer on your own. For example, let's say I was to ask my angel, what is the meaning of life? He'd probably turn it around on me and say, well, what do you think is the meaning of life? And through a series of questions and answers, he would help me discover the answer to my own question. Now, can that be a little irritating at times? Yes, sure. But that's how we truly learn, in my opinion. In a modern day school classroom, all too often, we find a teacher or professor up there giving a lecture to a group of slack-jawed, bleary-eyed, half asleep, possibly hungover, students who maybe are assimilating 5 or 10% of what's being shared with them. Or at best, they're able to store the information in their short-term memory. And then as soon as the final's over, they dump it like they're deleting a file on their computer. And I know I'm guilty of that kind of nonsense. Whenever I find myself in a situation as a student, being forced to take a subject that I didn't care about, that I wasn't interested in, I didn't see any use in it, like analytical geometry or calculus. I memorized what I needed to memorize, and then as soon as the final was over, I dumped it. I dumped that information because it was useless to me. I never thought about it because I never wanted to think about it. But when I think back to professors who made me think in class, who didn't just throw answers at me, but made me think about what the answers were and to logically work out a solution to whatever problem I had. If you're in college or university and you had a question about an assignment or an essay, if you had a good professor, you might go to their office or talk to them after class. And if they were a good professor, when you ask them about that essay or a particular question, they would probably ask you questions back, give you some alternatives, make you think through what the true answer is. And in that, you gain a victory. And since you worked out the information, it becomes valuable and it actually ends up sticking. So that's the approach that I believe is the most effective in teaching. And so it makes sense that my angel guide would be on the same signal, the same level. We've discussed this process, and he realizes that this is my growth journey. Sure, he can assist me from time to time, but it's my soul growth that's at stake here, and that's my responsibility. It's my job to improve myself, to work out solutions to problems that I have. It's not his. He's not there to be a crutch for me. He's not there to make all the bad things go away. Anyone who's encountered a might even be a friend of yours in college, who seems lost when their parents aren't around, or constantly calls their parents asking questions. What happened there is the parents were helicopter type parents. Say, I came from the baby boom generation. Our parents figured, hey, go outside and figure out your life. Yeah, they were there to lend help as needed, but they didn't believe it was their job to hover over you, to be that mama bear, which I hate that characterization, because mama bears are given all this credit. But my question is, if you're overprotective and your child grows up into an adult and never becomes self-sufficient, you've ended up raising a handicapped individual who now can't function on their own without relying upon you. And I think that's a real problem. You know, at least we baby boomers, yeah, you might say that we were a little neglected, but at the same time, we learned how to swim on our own. We learned how to solve problems on our own. If you had a bully in the schoolyard, teachers didn't want to hear about it. At least mine didn't. They figured solve it out in the schoolyard. That was the attitude. You may say that's barbaric, but you know what? It teaches you to work out problems with your peers rather than relying upon some authority to enforce some sort of set of rules and to enforce some set of discipline. You were allowed to work it out on your own. At any rate, that's his basic philosophy. He's not there to spoon feed me. He's there to lead me in ways that I can achieve self-discovery. Next up, he has other responsibilities. It might be a blow to my ego, but he's not a low-level guide. He's not a low-level light worker. He is higher up there. He has a lot of different responsibilities and a lot of different entities who report to him. I'm grateful that he is able to spend any amount of time with me. So the last thing I expect is for him to be there on call to solve all of my problems for me. Not to mention, I've mentioned this before and you know it's true, I am independent by nature. I don't like asking for help. Or at least I don't like asking for it until I have exhausted all options available to me. Because I don't want to become reliant on anybody or anything so that I can survive and continue to grow and learn. This is my journey, and I'm not going to rely upon anyone or anything to achieve that. It's my responsibility. Next, there's also information that he can't share with me. He provides me what he feels I need for the present and for my necessary soul growth. But I don't get everything I want. I just get what I need. Lastly, he's not omniscient. Now, compared to the average human being, he's Socrates, Plato, Einstein, and Tesla all wrapped up in one. But he doesn't know all universal information. He has limits. They're much greater than humans, but he still has limits. That's part of the organization of the universe. So there is knowledge that is generally outside of his realm of experience. So there's no omniscience going on here. That's some of the basic points I wanted to cover so that people can get a better idea as to, you know, what our true relationship is and why I don't automatically run to him every time I run into a problem. Heck, I didn't actually run into him until I was in college. I was projecting for years and years as a kid. It never occurred to me that I could ask for help. So I learned and taught myself the various abilities of astral projection through reading and through trial and error on my own. For instance, developing the time travel method, which I never found anywhere. At best, I found allusions to it, but I was able to work it out through a lot of trial and error. Lastly, I just want to mention the answer that I had for Treehouse about that whole idea of trying to transport my physical body. Quite frankly, the very prospect scares the hell out of me. When I ask to project in time, I have mentioned numerously that I can't control unless I've been somewhere in a space time exactly before so that I have the ident. But if I'm just picking a year here on Earth, for example, let's check out the year 4000, for instance. I don't know exactly when and where I'm going to show up. I have materialized and become conscious in dark water, seas, lakes, at night, which can be very disconcerting. I have I've awakened in deserts, in forests, and once in a farmer's field. Uh, Bringing along a physical body in these instances could have very negative connotations. Uh, because waking up in the middle of a deep and dark ocean can be scary when you're in the astral, and it can be very disconcerting. But doing that in a physical body would be more than just uncomfortable. It could be downright deadly. And I don't think my wife would want to find a dead body in bed smelling of salt water, assuming that I'd be able to go back again in that condition. I don't know. So it's an interesting idea, Treehouse, but it's not one that I wish to pursue. I'm just fine using my astral body to do that type of time traveling because it's infinitely better designed for some of the bizarre times and places where I might materialize. Not to mention, I've also materialized plenty of times floating above the earth looking down. In a physical body, that could be a long fall with a short stop. So I want to thank Treehouse for giving me the idea to do this episode and, of course, for his question. Hopefully this clears up any misconceptions about my relationship with my angel guide. And anybody looking to ask questions in the future about why I don't just go to my guide to get whatever answers I need, like going to Wikipedia, for instance. Now I think you have a better idea of what the nature of my relationship with my angel guide truly is. If you enjoyed or liked this episode, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure that bell is solid so you're informed on Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning for the new episodes. And I'd be very interested in your questions and comments. And because you never know when it'll give me an idea for an episode. I'm always relying upon you guys for giving me good ideas. And as always, this is Rick, and I'll see you on the astral plane.